Hazel adjusted the thin strap of her black dress, her reflection flickering in the mirror as she added a final touch of lipstick. The faint scent of her perfume drifted through the air, sweet, familiar, but tonight, it clung differently. Her heels tapped softly against the floor as she stepped back, tilting her head slightly as if assessing herself through someone else's eyes. Big night? I asked from the doorway, trying to keep my voice casual. Girls' night with Joanna, she replied, glancing over her shoulder with a quick smile. We're trying that new wine bar downtown. Her eyes met mine for a moment, just long enough to hold my gaze before she turned back to the mirror. She looked good. Too good. And for a night with her best friend, something about it didn't sit right. You look amazing, I said, the words tasting hollow as they left my lips. Thanks, babe. She grabbed her purse from the dresser, slipping her phone inside before slinging it over her shoulder. Don't wait up, we might stay out late. And just like that, she was gone. Hazel had always turned heads. Not just because of her looks though. With her deep brown eyes, wavy auburn hair, and a smile that could light up any room, it was impossible not to notice her. But it was more than that. She had a way of making people feel seen, of drawing them in with her laughter and warmth. It was one of the things that first drew me to her, back when we met at a mutual friend's party almost a decade ago. That I still remember the way she laughed that night, carefree, genuine, like she didn't have a worry in the world. We'd talked for hours, and by the end of the night, I knew I wanted to see her again. And somehow, I was lucky enough that she wanted the same. Our life together had been good, better than good, for a long time. We traveled, built careers we were proud of, and eventually settled into a cozy home with a backyard big enough for summer barbecues and late-night stargazing. Hazel loved decorating, filling our home with little touches that made it feel warm and lived in. She had a knack for creating spaces that felt both elegant and inviting. Just like her, our relationship wasn't perfect, no marriage is. We had our arguments, our moments of frustration. But we always found our way back to each other. Or at least, that's what I thought. One of the best parts of our life was the circle of friends we surrounded ourselves with. Joanna and James were at the center of that circle. Hazel and Joanna had been best friends since college, inseparable from the moment they met in their freshman dorm. Over the years, their bond had only grown stronger. They shared everything: inside jokes, late-night phone calls, even their love for spontaneous road trips that sometimes left me shaking my head in amusement. James and I had naturally become friends, too. We weren't as close as our wives, but we got along well, grilling burgers on summer weekends, watching football games, and trading stories about the ups and downs of marriage. There was a comfort in our friendship, a sense of trust that came from years of shared memories. For a long time, I thought we had it all. A marriage built on love and trust. Friendships that felt like family. A life that, while not perfect, was ours, and that was enough. At least, it used to be. The clock on the wall seemed louder than usual, its steady tick marking each passing second. I tried to focus on the game playing on the TV, but my gaze kept drifting toward the clock. Midnight. Then 1 o'clock. Each minute seemed to tighten the knot in my chest. By 1:30, I had stopped pretending to watch the game. I sat on the couch, my hands resting on my knees, eyes fixed on the front door as if staring hard enough would make her appear. At exactly 2:07 a.m., the lock clicked. Hazel stepped inside, her cheeks flushed from the cold night air. Her heels clicked softly against the hardwood floor as she set her purse down, her movements slow and deliberate, like someone trying not to wake a sleeping house. When she saw me waiting, she froze just for a second before her smile returned. You're still up? Her voice was light, casual, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes. Yeah. Couldn't sleep, I replied, my gaze steady. How was dinner? Oh, you know, Joanna and me, we always lose track of time. She slipped off her heels, her smile quick and easy. We tried that new wine bar downtown. You'd love the atmosphere. I tried texting you, I said, my voice low. Went straight to voicemail. Her smile didn't waver. Oh, my phone died. I meant to charge it before I left. but I forgot. Her explanation came too easily, each word falling into place like a rehearsed script. As she passed by, the faint scent of cologne, one that wasn't mine, brushed against the air. That I didn't move. Didn't speak. That I just sat there as she disappeared down the hall, the faint sound of her footsteps fading into silence, and in that silence, something shifted. Because for the first time, I couldn't ignore the feeling that something was wrong. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the curtains, casting warm streaks across the bedroom floor. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling while Hazel slept beside me, her breath soft and steady. The faint scent of her perfume still clung to the sheets, mixed with something else, something unfamiliar. That I rolled onto my side, watching her for a moment. Her auburn hair fanned out against the pillow, and her lips were slightly parted, peaceful and unaware. It should have been a comforting sight. But the knot in my chest tightened. That I thought of her smile when she walked through the door last night, too quick, too practiced. The way she had hesitated, just for a second, when she saw me waiting. And that faint trace of cologne that still lingered in the air. My mind spun with questions I couldn't ask. Was she really with Joanna all night? Why didn't she text me back? And whose cologne had I smelled on her clothes? I closed my eyes, trying to shake the thoughts away. Hazel stirred beside me, stretching with a soft sigh before her eyes fluttered open. When she saw me watching her, she smiled the same smile I'd fallen in love with years ago. Morning, she murmured, brushing her hair back from her face. Morning, I replied, forcing a smile in return. She sat up, rubbing her eyes. You're up early. Couldn't sleep? Something like that, I said. You got in late last night. Yeah, sorry about that, she said with a yawn. Joanna and I lost track of time. You know how we get. Her words were casual, but I heard the faint edge of defensiveness beneath them. Or maybe I was imagining it. That I sat up, studying her face. Hazel, is everything okay? Her smile faltered just slightly. Of course. Why wouldn't it be? I don't know. You've been going out a lot lately. More than usual. She laughed softly, brushing my shoulder as she stood. Come on, Calvin. I'm allowed to have a life outside of the house. Don't tell me you're getting jealous of my girls' nights. It's not that, I said quickly. I worry, that's all. Well, you don't need to. She leaned down and kissed my cheek, her lips warm against my skin. Now, come on. Let's get breakfast before the day slips away. Her smile was bright, her laughter easy as she disappeared down the hall. But even as I followed her into the kitchen, the knot in my chest refused to loosen. The next few days passed quietly, but the doubt lingered like a shadow I couldn't shake. Hazel seemed the same as always, laughing at my jokes, texting Joanna throughout the day, and curling up beside me on the couch at night. But her phone never left her side, and every time it buzzed, I couldn't help but wonder. Then, one evening, while Hazel was in the shower, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. That I glanced toward the bathroom, the sound of running water muffling any chance of her hearing me. My pulse quickened as I reached for the phone, my fingers hovering above the screen. Don't do it, I told myself. Trust her. But the doubt was stronger. I swiped the screen. The message was short, just a single line of text. James, last night was incredible. Can't wait to see you again. My heart slammed against my ribs, the air rushing from my lungs. I read the message again, as if the words might change if I stared long enough, but they didn't. James. Joanna's husband. I dropped the phone as if it had burned me, my breath coming in short, ragged bursts. My mind raced with images. I didn't want to see Hazel in someone else's arms, her laughter mixing with his. No. There has to be an explanation. The bathroom door creaked open, and I barely had time to step back before Hazel appeared, wrapped in a towel with her hair damp from the shower. She paused when she saw me, her eyes flicking to the phone on the nightstand. What's wrong? She asked, tilting her head slightly. I swallowed hard, forcing my voice to stay calm. Nothing. Just, lost in thought. Her gaze lingered on mine for a moment longer than necessary, as if she could sense the shift in the air. But then she smiled, stepping past me to get dressed. That I stood frozen, my pulse hammering in my ears, because now, I knew, and there was no going back. Hazel hummed softly as she got dressed, her towel slipping from her shoulders as she pulled on a sweater. I stood frozen near the nightstand, the message from James still burning in my mind. "Everything okay?" she asked, glancing over her shoulder. "Yeah," I lied, forcing a smile that felt like a mask. My pulse pounded as I watched her slip her phone into her pocket. I wanted to confront her right there, demand an explanation for the message that had shattered my world. But the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I turned and walked out of the room, my hands trembling at my sides. I needed time to think, because now, the doubt was gone that I had the proof. The days that followed felt like a blur. Each moment with Hazel, every laugh and touch, felt like a carefully rehearsed performance. I couldn't unsee the message from James. "Last night was incredible. Can't wait to see you again." Those words echoed in my mind like a broken record. Hazel carried on as if nothing had changed. She kissed me goodbye in the mornings, texted Joanna throughout the day, and curled up beside me on the couch at night. But now, every smile, every glance, every late-night outing felt like a lie. I tried to act normal, but the weight of what I knew pressed harder with each passing day. Every time her phone buzzed, my pulse quickened. Every time she stepped out of the house, I wondered if she was meeting him. One Friday night, Hazel announced another girls' night with Joanna. My chest tightened as I watched her slip into a red dress that hugged her figure, applying just a touch more makeup than usual. "Where are you two headed tonight?" I asked, keeping my tone casual. "Just dinner downtown," she replied with that familiar smile. "Nothing fancy." "Sounds fun. Don't stay out too late." She laughed softly, pressing a kiss to my cheek. "Don't worry, I'll be home before you miss me." After she left, I sat in the darkened living room, staring at the clock as the minutes dragged by. Midnight passed, then 1 a.m., but this time, I didn't wait. I grabbed my keys and drove downtown, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. I circled the streets near Hazel's favorite spots: the wine bar, the Italian bistro, the rooftop lounge she loved. Finally, I spotted her car parked near a boutique hotel, one I knew neither Hazel nor Joanna had ever mentioned. My heart pounded as I pulled over, my breath shallow and uneven. I stepped out of the car and stood there, staring at the hotel entrance as if the answers I needed were waiting just beyond those doors. And deep down, I knew the truth was closer than I wanted it to be. My breath clouded in the cool night air as I stood outside the boutique hotel. The soft hum of city life surrounded me: car engines, distant laughter, the faint clinking of glasses from a nearby bar. But all I could hear was the pounding of my heart. Hazel's car sat a few feet away, its familiar shape casting a shadow beneath the streetlights. My mind spun with possibilities, excuses I wanted to believe. Maybe she and Joanna stopped here for a drink. Maybe there's another explanation. But deep down, I knew better. My legs felt heavy as I approached the entrance, my pulse thrumming in my ears. The glass doors slid open with a faint whoosh, and warm air wrapped around me as I stepped inside. The lobby was sleek and modern: muted lighting, plush chairs, and soft music playing in the background. My gaze swept the space, searching for a familiar face, but the few guests I saw were strangers. I approached the front desk, my palms slick with sweat. The young woman behind the counter offered a polite smile. "Good evening. How can I help you?" I hesitated. My mouth felt dry. I'm looking for my wife. Hazel. She might be here with her friend, Joanna." The woman's smile didn't waver, but there was a flicker of curiosity in her eyes. "I'm sorry, sir. I can't share guest information." "I understand," I said quickly. I think I might have the wrong place." I turned away before she could respond, my pulse hammering as I moved toward the elevator bank. The numbers above the doors blinked softly as elevators ascended and descended, ferrying guests to their rooms. Then I saw him. James stepped out of an elevator on the far side of the lobby. His dark jacket was slightly rumpled, and his shirt collar was open as if he'd just loosened his tie. His gaze flicked toward me, and for a moment, we both froze. My heart dropped into my stomach. James' eyes widened, shock flashing across his face before he quickly masked it with a forced smile. He adjusted his collar as he approached, his footsteps slow and deliberate. "Calvin?" His voice was casual, but there was a strain beneath it. "What are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same thing," I replied, my voice tight. James chuckled awkwardly, rubbing the back of his neck. "Just, had a business meeting. Late-night client, you know how it is." I took a step closer, my gaze locking onto his. "Where's Hazel?" His smile faltered. "Hazel? Why would she be here?" "Don't lie to me," I said, my voice low and hard. James shifted his weight, glancing toward the entrance as if calculating the fastest way out. "Look, I don't know what you're— Where is she, James?" Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. His eyes flicked toward the elevator, just for a split second, but it was enough. Without another word, I turned and pressed the call button, my breath shallow and ragged as I waited. James stepped forward, reaching out as if to stop me. "Calvin, wait." The elevator doors slid open and there, standing inside with her hand pressed against the button panel, was Hazel. Her eyes met mine, wide with shock, and in that instant, I saw the truth written across her face. Time seemed to freeze as Hazel and I locked eyes. The distant hum of the elevator, the muted conversations in the lobby, even James' shallow breathing beside me, all of it faded into the background. "Calvin," Hazel's voice broke the silence, soft and strained, as if she could somehow undo what I'd seen. She stood just inside the elevator, her coat draped loosely over her shoulders, lipstick slightly smudged, and her auburn hair tousled as though she'd just run her fingers through it. The faint scent of his cologne lingered in the air between us. I stepped forward, my pulse hammering in my ears. "What the hell is going on, Hazel?" "Calvin, I can explain." My voice cracked with the weight of betrayal. "Explain what?" "That you've been sneaking around behind my back. That you're standing here." I gestured toward James, whose face had drained of color. "With him? Joanna's husband?" Hazel's mouth opened, but no words came out. "Say something," I shouted, the raw edge of my voice echoing in the elevator bay. A few guests in the lobby turned to glance our way, their curiosity thinly veiled behind polite expressions of disinterest. James stepped forward, raising his hands as if to defuse the situation. "Calvin, listen, don't." My glare cut through him like a blade. "You don't get to speak. Not after this." Hazel stepped out of the elevator, her heels clicking against the marble floor as she approached me. "Please, let's not do this here. Just come outside. We can talk." "Talk?" I repeated, the word bitter on my tongue. "You think there's anything left to say?" "Calvin, please." Her eyes brimmed with tears, but I couldn't tell if they were from guilt or fear of being caught. James glanced toward the exit, shifting his weight as if itching to disappear, but I wasn't about to let him slip away so easily. "You've been sleeping with my wife," I said, each word sharp and deliberate. "How long has this been going on?" James swallowed hard. Hazel opened her mouth to respond, but I cut her off with a raised hand. "No. I want to hear it from him." James hesitated, then exhaled slowly. "A few months. It had just happened, man. We didn't mean for it to." "Don't give me that." My chest heaved with the force of my breath. "You don't accidentally sneak around behind your best friend's back. You don't accidentally meet up in hotels in the middle of the night." Hazel reached for my arm, but I pulled away, the heat of her touch like a brand against my skin. "I never wanted to hurt you, Calvin." "Then why did you?" The words tore from my throat before I could stop them. "Why? Was it the thrill? The secrecy? What did he give you that I couldn't?" Tears spilled down her cheeks as she shook her head. "I don't know. I don't know how it started. You chose this, Hazel." I said coldly, my voice low but firm. Every text, every meeting you chose to lie to me. Don't stand here and pretend you don't know why. The silence that followed stretched thin and fragile between us. James shifted awkwardly beside us. Look. I never wanted it to get this far. Shut up, James. Hazel snapped suddenly, turning toward him with a flash of anger that caught both of us off guard. You said we'd be careful. You said. I echoed, the word slicing through my chest like glass. Hazel froze, her eyes wide as she realized what she'd just admitted. That I stepped back, the weight of it all crashing down on me. The late nights, the guarded phone, the faint scent of cologne that wasn't mine, it all made sense now. I trusted you, I whispered, my voice breaking. I trusted both of you, and you threw it all away. Hazel reached for me again, but I stepped back. No, I said, my breath shaky as I fought to hold myself together. Don't touch me. Don't say anything else. Just stay away from me. I turned and walked toward the exit, my footsteps echoing in the silence that followed, and as the glass doors slid shut behind me, I knew nothing would ever be the same again. That I drove through the empty streets, hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. The city lights blurred past, but my mind was stuck on Hazel's tear-filled eyes and James' guilty silence. Their words echoed in my head. A few months. We didn't mean for it to happen. Lies wrapped in half-truths. Pulling into the driveway, I killed the engine and sat there, the silence of the night pressing against my chest. My home, once a place of warmth, now felt like a stranger's house. That I stepped inside to the faint hum of the refrigerator, the distant tick of the hallway clock. The air felt heavier somehow, as if the walls themselves had absorbed the weight of what had happened. Dropping my keys on the table, I stood in the dark, breath shaky as the realization settled deep in my bones. Nothing would ever be the same again. The house felt different now, quieter, heavier. Each step I took echoed through the empty rooms, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. I stood in the dim glow of the kitchen, staring at the clock on the wall. 3:12 a.m. I hadn't slept. How could I? My mind kept replaying the scene at the hotel. Hazel stepping out of the elevator, James' guilty eyes, the way her voice cracked as she tried to explain the unexplainable. A faint creak from upstairs broke the silence. My pulse quickened as I heard the soft shuffle of footsteps. A moment later, Hazel appeared at the top of the staircase, wrapped in her robe. Her eyes found mine in the dim light, hesitation written across her face. Calvin, she started, her voice soft, tentative. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Slowly, she descended the stairs, each step a reminder of the distance between us. When she reached the bottom, she stood there, hands gripping the edges of her robe like a shield. I know you hate me right now, she whispered. Silence. I never wanted this to happen. I swear. It just, don't. I cut her off, my voice rough from hours of holding back. Don't tell me it just happened. You made a choice, Hazel. Over and over again. Her breath hitched, and tears filled her eyes. But I couldn't let myself care. Not now. How long? I asked, my voice low but firm. She swallowed hard, looking away. 5 months. Maybe 6. I clenched my fists, the air leaving my lungs in a slow, shaky exhale. And Joanna? Does she know? Hazel's eyes snapped up, wide with panic. No. She doesn't know. I swear, Calvin, she has no idea. I laughed bitterly, the sound hollow in the stillness. So you betrayed her, too? Perfect. Please, Calvin. Can we just talk? Just give me a chance to explain. Explain what? I asked, stepping closer. How you looked me in the eye every day, knowing what you were doing behind my back. How you lied to my face while sneaking around with someone we both trusted. Tears slipped down her cheeks, but I couldn't find it in myself to care. I'm sorry, she whispered. I shook my head. Sorry doesn't erase what you did, Hazel. It doesn't change the fact that I can't even look at you without seeing him. Silence fell between us again, heavy with the weight of everything unsaid. Finally, I stepped back, the distance between us feeling like a chasm neither of us could cross. "I can't do this right now," I said, my voice breaking. "I need time. I need space." Her breath hitched as she took a shaky step forward. "Calvin, please," but I turned away before she could finish, my footsteps echoing through the hall as I walked upstairs, leaving her standing alone in the dark. The days that followed were a blur of hollow conversations and unspoken words. Hazel and I moved through the house like strangers, our paths crossing in silence. Every glance, every accidental touch, was a reminder of what had been broken. I slept in the guest room. The first night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint sounds of Hazel shifting restlessly in our bedroom. Each creak of the mattress, each muffled sob, twisted the knife deeper. But I didn't move. I couldn't. During the day, I avoided her as much as possible. I left early for work and stayed late, finding excuses to stay out longer just to avoid coming home. When I did come back, the air felt heavier, thicker, as if the walls themselves had absorbed the weight of our shattered trust. On the third night, Hazel knocked softly on the door of the guest room. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands clasped tightly together as I stared at the floor. "Calvin, can we talk?" Her voice was hesitant, fragile. I didn't answer. The door creaked open slightly, and she stepped inside. I could feel her gaze on me, but I didn't look up. "I know I hurt you," she said, her voice trembling. "And I know I can't take back what I did, but I need you to know that it wasn't because I stopped loving you." I clenched my jaw, my breath catching in my throat. "If you loved me, you wouldn't have done it," I replied, my voice rough and low. Tears welled in her eyes, but I forced myself to hold firm. "I don't know why it happened," she continued, stepping closer. "I never planned for it. But somewhere along the way, I lost sight of what we had. And I hate myself for it." Silence hung heavy between us. Finally, I looked up, meeting her gaze for the first time in days. Her eyes, once filled with warmth and laughter, were now clouded with regret. But regret wasn't enough. "I don't know if I can forgive you," I said, my voice breaking. "I don't know if I even want to try." Her breath hitched, but she nodded slowly. "I understand. But, please, Calvin. Don't shut me out completely. Let me at least try to make this right." I looked away, my heart aching with the weight of everything we'd lost. "I need time," I whispered, and with that, Hazel stepped back, her footsteps fading as she left the room, leaving me alone with the echoes of what used to be. Days turned into weeks, but the distance between us never closed. Hazel tried cooking my favorite meals, leaving handwritten notes with apologies that couldn't erase the past, and offering tentative smiles that I couldn't bring myself to return, but every glance, every touch, every shared space between us carried the weight of her betrayal. The air in our home felt heavy, suffocating, like a storm that refused to break. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the living room, Hazel stood near the window, her arms wrapped around herself as if trying to hold the pieces of her world together. I sat across the room, the silence between us stretching thin as glass. "We can't keep living like this," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't respond. "Calvin, please, talk to me," she pleaded, turning to face me. "I know I hurt you. I know I broke your trust. But I can't fix this if you won't let me in." I met her gaze, my chest tightening with a mix of anger, sadness, and exhaustion. "How do you expect me to just forget what happened? Every time I look at you, I see him. Every late night, every girls' night, every time your phone buzzed, I see it all, Hazel. And it doesn't go away." Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't look away. "I know. I know it won't be easy. But I'm still here, Calvin. I'm still fighting for us. Doesn't that count for something?" I stood, running a hand through my hair as I paced the room, the walls closing in with each step. "I don't know if I can do this anymore," I admitted, the words tasting like defeat. Hazel stepped closer, her hand brushing my arm, soft, tentative, as if afraid I might pull away. "Please, Don't give up on us, she whispered. That I looked at her, the woman I'd loved for so many years, the woman who had once been my world, and all I could see was the shadow of what we'd lost. I need time, I said again, the only words I could manage. Hazel's shoulders sagged as she stepped back, tears slipping silently down her cheeks, and as I turned away, the distance between us felt more permanent than ever before. The next morning, the air between us was thick with unspoken words. Hazel moved through the kitchen in silence, her eyes downcast as she poured coffee. The clink of the mug against the counter seemed louder than it should have been, echoing in the space between us. Do you want some? She asked, her voice soft. No, thanks, I replied, not looking up from my phone. She hesitated for a moment as if searching for something else to say, but the words never came. Instead, she left the room, her footsteps fading down the hall. Later that afternoon, as I sat in the living room scrolling aimlessly through emails, the doorbell rang. I stood, my pulse quickening for reasons I couldn't explain, and opened the door. Joanna stood on the porch, her eyes wide and uncertain. Hey. Can we talk? She asked, her voice tight. That I stepped aside to let her in, my mind already racing. She stood in the center of the room, wringing her hands. I know something's wrong. James has been acting strange lately, and Hazel, she won't return my texts. I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat making it difficult to speak. Joanna, before I could finish, her eyes met mine, sharp with sudden understanding. She wasn't with me that night, was she? I opened my mouth to deny it, but the truth was too heavy to push aside. I looked away, unable to hold her gaze. Oh my God, Joanna whispered, her voice breaking. It was James, wasn't it? The silence that followed said more than words ever could. Tears welled in her eyes as she clutched her chest as though trying to hold herself together. How long have you known? Not long, I admitted, my voice hollow. I found out a few weeks ago. And you didn't tell me? Her voice cracked with a mixture of pain and betrayal. I wanted to, but I didn't know how, I said, my hands clenching at my sides. I didn't want to hurt you. Well, congratulations, Calvin, she said bitterly, wiping her eyes. We're both hurt now. Before I could respond, Hazel appeared in the doorway, her face paling as she took in the scene. Joanna, what are you doing here? She asked, her voice shaky. Joanna turned toward her, eyes blazing with anger and heartbreak. How could you? She demanded, her voice rising. How could you do this to me, to us? Hazel's lips parted as if to respond, but no sound came out. I stood frozen between them, watching as the fragile threads holding our lives together began to unravel, and in that moment, I knew there was no going back. The room felt suffocating as silence hung heavy between us. Joanna's tear-filled eyes locked onto Hazel's, demanding answers that couldn't be given. How long? Joanna asked, her voice cracking. Hazel opened her mouth, but no words came. How long? Joanna shouted, fists clenched at her sides. 5 months, I answered quietly, unable to look at either of them. Joanna staggered back as if struck, her breath hitching. You were supposed to be my best friend. Hazel stepped forward, reaching out. Joanna, please, don't touch me. Joanna snapped, her voice sharp with betrayal. She spun on her heel and stormed out, the front door slamming shut behind her. Hazel stood frozen, tears streaming down her face as the echoes of the door faded into silence, and I could only wonder if this was the beginning of the end. The house seemed to hold its breath after Joanna's departure, as if waiting for the next blow to fall. Hazel stood motionless near the doorway, her hands trembling at her sides. Her tear-streaked face twisted with emotions I couldn't decipher: guilt, regret, fear. I sat on the edge of the couch, the weight of it all pressing down on my chest like a stone. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The air between us was too thick with everything that had been said and everything that hadn't. Finally, Hazel broke the silence. Calvin. I'm so sorry. Her voice cracked on the last word, but I couldn't bring myself to look at her. My gaze remained fixed on the floor, where shadows from the late afternoon sun stretched across the hardwood. Sorry doesn't change what you did, I said quietly, my voice raw. It doesn't erase the nights you lied to me. It doesn't undo what happened with James. I know, she whispered. But why? I asked, cutting her off as I finally met her gaze. Why him? Why us? Hazel's lips trembled as fresh tears spilled from her eyes. I don't know. I don't have a good answer. I felt lost. Like I was drowning in the routine of our life, and I didn't know how to tell you. James was easy. A distraction. But I never wanted to lose you, Calvin. I never wanted this to happen. I shook my head, the words slicing through me like glass. You had a choice. You always had a choice. And you chose to lie. To cheat. To betray me, and Joanna. Hazel stepped closer, her hands reaching out as if to bridge the distance between us. But I stepped back. The space between us felt like an uncrossable chasm. I need to know, I said, my voice low and strained. Was it just sex, or was it more? She hesitated, and that hesitation was all the answer I needed. It wasn't just sex, I whispered, the realization hollowing me out from the inside. You loved him. No. Hazel cried, shaking her head. No, I didn't. I swear, Calvin, it wasn't love. It was a mistake. A terrible, selfish mistake. But you're the one I love. I swear, I never stopped loving you. I swallowed hard, my chest tightening with a pain so sharp it stole my breath. Then why doesn't it feel like enough? Hazel sobbed, her shoulders shaking as she clutched her chest. Please, Calvin, don't leave me. Don't give up on us. But as I looked into her tear-filled eyes, all I could see was the ghost of what we'd lost, and I wasn't sure if we could ever get it back. Hazel stood before me, tears streaming down her face as she clutched my hand. Her grip trembled, desperate and pleading, please, Calvin. Don't leave. I know I messed up, but I love you. We can fix this, we can try. My chest ached with the weight of everything unsaid. I wanted to believe her, I wanted to believe that love could mend what had been broken. But the image of her with James lingered in my mind like a scar that wouldn't fade. I loved you more than anything, I said, my voice rough. But I can't forget, and I don't know if I can forgive. Hazel's sob caught in her throat as she clung tighter, but I gently pulled my hand away. I need to do what's right for me, I whispered. The silence that followed was the loudest sound I'd ever heard, and this time, I was the one who walked away. Days passed, then weeks. The house that once felt like home now echoed with emptiness. Hazel had moved out, leaving behind only fragments of what we used to be, photographs in frames, half-forgotten notes scribbled in margins of shared books, and the faintest trace of her perfume lingering in the air. First, the silence was suffocating. But slowly, it became a space where I could breathe again. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of amber and violet, I stood on the porch, hands resting on the railing. The air felt lighter somehow, like the weight of betrayal had finally begun to lift. That I thought of Hazel, of the love we once had and the choices that tore us apart. The pain was still there, but it no longer defined me. In the distance, laughter echoed from a nearby yard, simple, genuine, untouched by the kind of heartbreak that leaves scars, and in that moment, I realized I was ready to move forward, not with bitterness, not with regret, but with hope, because sometimes, the end of one story is just the beginning of another.